Whether it's chain-smoking their way into a severe heart attack or surviving twin rogue waves almost washing them away, the fishermen of Deadliest Catch have endured some incredibly harrowing moments. The rough and challenging waters of the Bering Sea can even extend into the cannery harbors to which the crabbers deliver their product. During the Season 17 episode, The Ultimate Price, the Summer Bay had to deal with one of the worst harbors in the entire sea. It is near the end of the season, and the Summer Bay is headed for one of the few canneries still open, though this one is notorious for having an incredibly dangerous harbor. Captain Wild Bill Witrowski tries to maneuver his vessel into the port, but he gets caught in the surf zone, and the massive swells keep turning his boat around, prompting the captain to call his crew inside. At multiple points, the Summer Bay is almost completely submerged, with one giant wave just about flipping the vessel upside down and pouring water into the wheelhouse. The captain later remarked that it was one of the closest calls of his career, and even the camera crew profusely thanked him for saving their lives. It was a harrowing ending to a season that had already seen tragedy strike the crew of the Summer Bay, with the ship's 33-year-old deck boss, Nick McGlashan, dying in December 2020. In every episode of Deadliest Catch, crab fishing vessels have to travel to the most remote parts of the Bering Sea in order to catch crab. While this allows them access to some of the freshest and best-tasting seafood, it also leaves them totally cut off from hospitals and doctors, sometimes by hundreds of miles. While crews will typically have at least one medically certified individual on board, these professionals are pretty limited in what they can do. During the Season 9 finale episode, The Final Battle, deckhand Brandon Jaime gets several of his fingers caught in a bait chopper while at sea. With Jaime bleeding heavily, with no medical facilities on the ship, the captain calls in the Coast Guard for an airlift rescue. However, the weather is so poor at first that the Coast Guard is initially unable to rescue the injured crewman. The Coast Guard has to wait for a break in the storm to finally airlift Jaime off the boat, taking him to the closest hospital where he's briefly treated before being flown to a specialist on the mainland. For many fishermen, the season does not end until they can finally return to their home and get a good night's sleep in their own bed. As Deadliest Catch star Captain Sig Hansen showed in the Season 12 finale, even heading back to port can be deadly. As the Northwestern is ending its season, Hansen starts to experience serious chest and arm pains. He is unsure of exactly what is going on, even after the camera crew starts to notice he is experiencing discomfort, and he goes so far as to claim that he isn't dying. Hansen is immediately rushed to the hospital when the Northwestern makes it to port, and his doctor reveals the terrifying truth. Hansen wasn't experiencing just any heart attack, but one commonly known as a widowmaker. According to the Cleveland Clinic, it's called the widowmaker due to its fast fatal potential, as 50% of the heart's blood supply is immediately compromised. Hansen was incredibly lucky that his heart attack happened when he was already headed to port, or things could have ended much worse. His doctor made it clear how close he came to dying. Going overboard on Deadliest Catch doesn't only include the risk of getting crushed by the boat, but drowning, getting attacked by animals, and succumbing to hypothermia. During the appropriately titled Season 14 episode Greenhorn Overboard, Summer Bay Greenhorn Spencer Moore is working hard to pull in some buoys during a severe storm, when one of them pulls Moore overboard and into the Bering Sea. While the crew manages to pull Moore on board and save his life, he spends several moments in the freezing waters as they struggle to pull him up. This shock to his system renders Moore motionless after getting back on the deck, though he does eventually manage to make his way inside. He profusely thanks his shipmates for saving his life and seems to be physically okay. But it's hard to imagine just how terrifying the moment was, with Moore being incredibly lucky that his crewmates were able to act so quickly and efficiently. In order for fishermen to do their jobs, with most Deadliest Catch crews only consisting of 4 deckhands, they have to utilize a lot of hydraulic and mechanized equipment to catch, sort, and store thousands of pounds of crab. Most of the time, the equipment helps the crabbers accomplish their job much more easily, but that's not always the case. During the Season 10 episode Blonde Ambition, a moving hydraulic table traps wizard deckhand Roger Schlostein between the pot and the table. Immediately, Schlostein starts screaming, collapsing to the deck as soon as the table moves away. His back injury appears so severe that Keith Colburn, the Wizard's captain, comes down to check on him. Without immediate access to a hospital, Schlostein is forced to get by with only rudimentary pain meds. The label Greenhorn on Deadliest Catch is meant for the rookie deckhands who are in their first season of crab fishing. Greenhorns can be young or old, and they can be subjected to some pretty severe ridicule from the rest of the crew. Veteran crabbers who have been in the industry for years or even decades, while they have to learn the dangerous and demanding ropes of crab fishing. During the Season 10 episode, Skipper Harris in Training, Greenhorn Miles Johnson learns just how dangerous life at sea can be while working on the Cape Caution. As he's hauling in full crab pots at night, he takes an unexpected hit directly into his face. Johnson is knocked over, his face a bloody mess. Luckily, one of the other crew members is also a registered EMT, and he is able to dispense some quick care to stop the bleeding. However, Captain Wild Bill was still worried about the possibility of a concussion, so he had Johnson monitored throughout the night. Thankfully, Johnson only suffered a broken nose. On Deadliest Catch, things can go from bad to worse very quickly, such as a horrifying bout of dehydration suffered by Wizard Greenhorn Chris Scambler during Season 8. Complaining about a pain in his arm and numbness in his face, Scambler manages to walk off the deck, but collapses, seeing double. As Scambler's body starts to completely shut down, his heart rate skyrockets while his blood pressure drops. Captain Colburn's quick thinking leads to a dramatic mid-sea rescue by the Coast Guard, who in all likelihood saves Scambler's life. Colburn and his crew were rattled by the incident, and Scambler was unable to continue on the vessel for the remainder of the season. It was one of the show's most intense moments, serving as a serious reminder about how dangerous fishing can be in the Bering Sea. Getting the Coast Guard involved for an at-sea rescue happens more often than many might think, especially if you are a crew member on Deadliest Catch. Unfortunately, in the Season 18 episode Crushed at Sea, the crew of the Patricia Lee find themselves crabbing during a severe storm, when deckhand Francis Katungan gets crushed between two massive crab pots. This severely injures Katungan's back and puts him in immense pain. Worse yet, the Patricia Lee is far out at sea and out of the Coast Guard's 100-mile rescue zone. To save Katungan's life, Captain Rip Carlton races through the storm to get to the outer edge of the rescue zone so the Coast Guard can pick him up. Once the Medevac team safely makes it aboard, they have to deal with the delicate issue of Katungan's back, which they cannot risk abruptly moving. When he's finally secured, the Coast Guard is able to lift Katungan off the Patricia Lee. While Katungan survived his injuries, his career as a crabber may be over. One of the most important roles of any ship captain sailing through the Bering Sea is to be attentive and alert. During the Season 3 episode, Cheating Death, the Time Bandit is sailing through rough seas when Captain Hillstrand notices one of the deckhands of a nearby fishing vessel, Josh White, is in a very precarious situation on the side of the ship trying to secure the crab pots. But the moment after Hillstrand loses track of White, he instantly realizes that White has fallen overboard. The Time Bandit is able to pull the drowning White out of the ocean. While he's deep in the early stages of hypothermia, the crew immediately replaces his soaking wet clothes with a thick, warm blanket. White starts thanking and hugging Hillstrand almost as soon as he sees him. Though it came fairly early in the series, this became one of the show's defining moments. It showcased the danger and peril which these commercial fishermen experience on a daily basis. And luckily, it finishes with a happy ending. Since the Bering Sea is massive, most vessels find themselves largely alone when out fishing. Occasionally, ships will see rival fishermen or other vessels in the same area, but it definitely isn't the norm. That made the collision in the Season 17 episode, Russian Dragger, especially alarming. The Wizard is steaming along when another boat cuts in front of them. Unable to stop or maneuver out of the way, Captain Colburn frantically screams over the radio for the other ship to move. But his pleas are to no avail, and the Wizard plows into the other boat, risking the lives of both ships' crews. Thankfully, the Wizard's anchor acted as a crumple zone for the ship and absorbed the brunt of the impact between the two vessels. When the crew determines that the ship is structurally sound, both vessels manage to sail away from the incident. When Jake Anderson takes over for Elliot Neese as the captain of the Saga, things don't quite get off to the best start. During his first voyage in charge, in the Season 11 episode 5-Year Storm, the Saga runs into some rough weather that produces violent waves up to 40 feet tall. At a particularly intense moment, 2 massive waves plunge the deck underwater and send the deck crew swimming. The crew members could have easily slid into a piece of heavy equipment and been severely injured, or even be swept right off the deck into the freezing ocean. The Saga itself nearly capsizes from the impact, but control of the vessel is regained before anyone gets hurt. However, this doesn't stop the crew from being more than a little upset over what happened. Relief Captain Ray Flershinger claimed that the waves were rogue and he had no way to avoid them or adequately warn the crew. In the end, while no one was seriously injured physically, it was a less than auspicious start for Anderson's captaincy. Imagine for a moment that you are crab fishing on the Bering Sea. It's late at night and the temperatures are sub-zero. Suddenly, you lose all power and the ship is plunged into darkness. To make things worse, a fire breaks out in the engine room and your electrical system is completely fried. That's exactly the situation Captain Sig Hansen and the Northwestern found themselves in during Season 12's Fire at Sea. The fire occurs in the middle of the crew hauling in pots full of crab, and it brings the entire operation to a standstill. After the crew puts the fire out, they realize the electrical system is severely damaged. This puts the lives of the crew and thousands of pounds of crab at risk, as the pumps on the Northwestern are controlled electronically. With the crew nearly 200 miles away from any landmass, this incident could have been fatal. Luckily, they're able to get their 4-cylinder engine working, saving the day and the crab, getting the Northwestern home safely.